forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March.
Again, rebounded by Indiana. The game is over.
For the fans who love the crunch of the pads, prefer a dunk,
Oh, he just took the gravity.
and expect nothing but the best. It's Bigger 10. Here's Steve Dace.
And greetings. Welcome to this week's episode of Bigger 10. I am Steve Dace alongside my co-host, but of course, never partner, Aaron McIntyre. And Aaron, if you can believe it, we are halfway through the college football season already, brother. How you feeling?
You know, overall, it's, it feels like it too outside. The temperature outside, it really does feel like fall. And it's really, we're going to be heading into the meat grinder portion of the season, especially in Big Ten country. And so overall, enjoyed every Saturday thus far. And I expect this weekend, an Iowa loss for sure, notwithstanding, I'll enjoy this one as well.
And it's going to be the last season as we have known college football forever, given what's coming down the pike. And that's one of the things we'll be discussing here in a moment as we get going with our big 5 topics here on Bigger 10. Let's start with the Buckeyes. This was kind of the first, I guess we'll call it, big game of Big Ten play. Maryland had played the weakest schedule in the league, according to Sagarin, but they were 5-0, off to their best start since 1913 when you look at both wins and then margin of victory. The first time they were 5-0 since 2001. Ohio State, of course, is kind of used to being here. They've been the dominant program in the Big Ten so far in the 21st century. And they're 5-0 as well, ranked in the top 5 of the major polls. And they ended up rolling in this game, although it was what I find fascinating watching this. And you can see this too if you follow a lot of the Ohio State team media, folks that are, these are huge websites that do a great job, the Bucknuts, the 11 Warriors. A lot of kvetching about the offensive line at Ohio State. The Buckeyes ran the ball over 30 times for just 60 yards. Clearly, this is something Ryan Day, Aaron, is trying to accomplish. He's been criticized at times for not being patient enough with the running game. And he's clearly trying. This game was in doubt.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, they trailed for large stretches of this game. I mean, they just opened it up in the fourth quarter. So they ended up covering the spread depending on when you got the line. But they trailed for large stretches of this game. They were trying to run the football, trying to be more physical. They ran over 30 times for just 62 yards. Eventually, they just said, screw it, man. Chuck it up to Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka and let's see what happens. And what happened is, and Cade Stover as well, their outstanding tight end, they scored 20 unanswered points to pull away here. And so they went back to their bread and butter in the second half. Now the question moving forward with Penn State a week from now, Michigan at the end of the year, those are the games that are going to matter the most. And then they've got Wisconsin right after that Penn State game, by the way. So that's on the road. Those 3 games matter the most. Are they as explosive as they've been in the passing game the last few years that they can just beat those teams that way? Or do they got to figure out how to generate some kind of a running game to complement that?
So I think the first half of that Ohio State game, it was definitely, Joel Klatt described it, and I described it to a buddy of mine texting about the game. It's like they were sleepwalking. And I think, you're coming off of a bye or an idle week, and you had that big win against Notre Dame, all the hullabaloo about are you soft, are you not? I just think that they kind of got off. They had trouble getting off the mat. So psychologically, I think that had a big part of this. I don't know, man. I think in the second half, they figured out, you know what? We don't have a quarterback like we used to have, but sure as heck are not going to go down without taking swings with our wide receivers, and they figured out, let's just chuck it up. Let's just throw it up there. Let's just let our strength on our offense shine, and just let the chips fall where they will. Because, as you said, they weren't doing much on the ground at all. I would be still concerned about the offensive line. In the first half, they really did, on numerous occasions, they got their butts handed to them. I don't know if I'm an Ohio State fan, I'm looking at this, and I as a Kansas City Chiefs fan, I see the Chiefs passing to set up the run quite a bit, and that's a buzzword, a buzz term, what have you, where it used to be you run to set up the pass. It's the other way around. I think if I'm Ohio State and I'm an Ohio State fan, I want to see them keep on chucking it up keep on chucking it up. Make sure you make the defense respect with every ounce that they can those weapons you have on the outside so that maybe you make your life easier on the offensive line. That's where I would go with this. I'd say at this point of the season, we're halfway through, make sure you don't go down without utilizing and showcasing the strength of your offense, and that's those wide receivers. So, again, I think if they employ that strategy that they did in the second half, that's going to be more difficult against teams with better secondaries. Not better secretaries. I think if you're losing to a team with better secretaries, you've got some other issues. But better secondaries, that's going to be harder to do, but you just can't go down because it is going to be a liability, that offensive line. You just can't go down without swinging your best weapons, and those are the wide receivers. So I'd say if you're an Ohio State fan, you'd probably hope, if you don't see any major improvements, which you may not this time of the season, I'd say you better hope that they start to try to pass to set up the run a little bit more, because you do have to, once you get into November, you do have to run the ball.
All right, let's talk about the team that, of course, they're looking ahead to. Because that's the game. Michigan and Ohio State. Wolverines, number one, according to Sagarin, number one, according to ESPN's FP+. Statistically, the numbers, we talked about this on the channel yesterday on Michigan podcast. I mean, the numbers are disgusting for this era of college football, including Michigan has not faced a first and goal situation on defense yet, and they're halfway through the year. Now, I do think all of this has to be buttressed against the schedule, which Sagarin right now ranks 68th in the country. So basically, the Mendoza line, right at about 50%, halfway. There's about 135 teams, so that's pretty close to half of college football. So nothing great, nothing terrible. The question is this a level of dominance, Aaron, that transcends the competition? And then number two, how much of a benefit of the doubt do you give Michigan, given what we've seen the Wolverines do the last 2 years, and a lot of these are the same players that were doing it? And so you factor that into, it might be against scrubs now, but we know what these guys can do. Or are you a guy that says, even if you're returning a bunch of guys, every single year is its own self-contained ecosystem?
So the answer to your first question, I believe, is yes, and I'll tell you why. And you've brought this up on Michigan podcast and maybe on Bigger Ten before about the number of second stringers that have played. How many people traveled with Michigan to Minnesota?
74 and 73 played against Minnesota. The only one that didn't was the backup long snapper.
Yeah, and you looked at the second half when they were throwing all of these second and third stringers in, and it was still like Minnesota was running into a brick wall. So to me, the answer is yes. This probably transcends the level of competition that they're playing right now. The only concern I have is the one that you shared yesterday on Michigan podcast, which is when adversity actually hits, which the last couple of times we've seen that's Bowling Green and then TCU, J.J. McCarthy has gotten a little flustered.
Yep.
Also against TCU, he had some really great moments as well. So even that's not as big of a concern, I think, as maybe you have. But that is the only concern. And this is, a spacebar concern when you're rolling up 52 points at Minnesota. Still haven't, as you said, had an opponent inside your own 10-yard line. So, yeah, this is a level of dominance that I think transcends the level of opponent that they're playing right now. And I will just have you know, Steve, and I told you this yesterday off the air, I unmuted Michigan podcast last week, okay? I think it was early third quarter.
Aaron cannot handle my meltdowns on game day.
When it was still, Minnesota was still within a possession or two. You said something along the lines of, so this is still going to be a game. I went on DraftKings. I put $25 down on an alternate line of Michigan minus 35.5.
In game.
Yeah. In game for like almost 3-1 odds, and that hit. So I just want to let you know.
Tell Bella thank you for the nice dinner she had over the weekend.
Meltdowns
right?
Making money over here.
Well, this is a good segue to the next topic again. So we're not going to get into the specifics. We've got an entire off season to do that. Okay. Plus, who knows, by the time, if we broke it down now, next week, Clemson and Florida State might be in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Doing another schedule, guys. Okay? I mean, how many schedules has the Big Ten put out since COVID, Aaron, that never actually were played?
We're on 3 now.
I think we're on 3, yeah. All right. Nevertheless, we got to look. There's the grid. These schedules are insane. I mean, absolutely insane that everybody's playing. And here's a question. There's been a lot of talk about how ironic it is. This is the best year the Pac-12 has had in like 20 years, and it's going to be the last season. We've got 3 Big Ten teams who right now, if we did the college football playoff rankings, they'd all be on that last screen of the top 16s, somewhere in there. All 3 of them would be. Could we be looking at, starting next year, there will never be another undefeated team in the Big Ten ever again?
I disagree with that. I think Michigan and Penn State are built the same way that Georgia on a different level is built in the SEC. And maybe it's unfair to Georgia or maybe Michigan and Penn State to compare one another. I just think the way that you build your teams has everything to do with whether or not you can hold up over a schedule like that. So I think Michigan is built in a way, now recruiting classes upcoming notwithstanding, I think Michigan is built in a way. They could even go, look at the schedule. If they were playing this schedule this year, Oregon, USC, those would be tough games. I still think Michigan wins fairly comfortably in those games. Ohio State, well, they've already beat. I think the biggest test would be Washington on the road for Michigan if they were playing that schedule this year. So I could see Michigan, if they were playing that schedule this year, I could see them going undefeated. Look at Penn State. If Penn State were playing this schedule or next year's schedule this year, Minnesota's a win, Purdue's a win, USC, that would be a tough game, but I think they'd at least be very close at the end. Wisconsin's a win, Illinois, Maryland, Ohio State. I think they'll beat Ohio State, UCLA, and then again, the toughest game is Washington, and that's at home. Now, I get that's not going to be the schedule every single year. I just think it has everything to do with how you're built. And if you're built to run the ball and stop the run and play stifling defense, which is what Georgia has enjoyed over the past couple of seasons, even with something called a Stetson Bennett at quarterback, which I know that he's not playing this year, I still think you could see an undefeated team. Not on the regular, but I do think you'll see undefeated teams coming out of the Big Ten.
Okay. Well, let's go to the Big Ten West. Let's come back now to this year. We'll have plenty of time to break that schedule grid down when we get to the grueling offseason. Is the Big Ten West title on the last ever Big Ten West title on the line this Saturday when your Hawkeyes go to Madtown to take on Wisconsin, which if you looked at last week's games with these two teams, Iowa did not complete a pass to a wide receiver. The Hawkeyes only have 67 pass completions on the season. And they're not a triple option team.
Yeah.
Deacon Hill, the good news, and I watched, I think, every snap of your game against Purdue. The good news with Deacon Hill is his passes were so off, they couldn't even be intercepted. Like, if you had any form of tight coverage on an Iowa receiver or receiving target, because they don't throw to the receivers, if you were in the vicinity of the Iowa receiving target, you probably weren't going to pick it off because the ball was that far off. They only completed 6 passes, 5 of them to tight end Eric All, who was great, by the way, in the game. But you look at Wisconsin, man, that dairy raid is still not taken off. Tanner Mordecai and his receivers. Remember the Big Ten media crew on the bus tour were raving about the receivers and the passing game for Wisconsin. We have not seen that. It looks like the same Wisconsin as always. They're just running it out of a spread now, but it's the same running attack with a complementary football. It looks like they've almost given up on the idea of the dairy raid, and they're just going to run, Braylon Hill downhill out of a spread rather than out of a pro set. If you look at last week's game against Rutgers was inside the 10 before half, going in for a touchdown maybe, throws a pick 6. That was a 14-point swing.
Yep.
Wisconsin only won the game by 11, okay? So this has rock fight written all over it, and I am very tempted to make under 36 one of my plays this week, which is just a sickening total in a modern college football game. But I think first one to 17 is winning this game, I think.
So we'll start with Wisconsin, and I told you earlier this week, talking about this off the air, they don't look radically different at all. They really don't. And I was watching that game against Rutgers, and I watched almost every snap of that game. And I've seen that game a dozen times before. Rutgers couldn't do anything on offense. 3-and-out, punt. Wisconsin gets a first down, punt. Rutgers 3-and-out again, punt. Wisconsin gets a couple of first downs, punt, field goal miss, something like that. Rutgers 3-and-out, and then all of a sudden it's the middle of the second quarter and Rutgers defense is gassed. And that's when Wisconsin started opening up a few holes. There was a Braylon Allen fumble towards the middle of the second quarter that I think Rutgers kind of kept Rutgers in. And then, like you just said, that pick 6 before halftime, that just looks like the Wisconsin that we've seen for the last decade. And so I'm going into this game as an Iowa fan seeing this over and over again. Now, the spread was -3 in favor of Wisconsin back in 2021. So that was after 2020 when Iowa beat them again. An asterisk there. Going into Madison, probably Big Ten West on the line, which it ended up not being. Iowa made it to the Big Ten championship game after Wisconsin kind of melted down towards the end of the season, thinking, hey, just keep this a rock fight. Don't embarrass yourself. And it was, I think 27-7. 27-7 with a total of 35.5, which is very similar. So
And the under hit.
Yeah. So I'm going into this one. I view Iowa's offense as not even that much better prepared. Deacon Hill, it's like watching the ball come out of his hands sometimes. And I think you look at the defenders' looks on their face, like, what was that?
That wasn't supposed to be
It's up in the
there.
third road now? What the heck? What was that? It was in his
That's
hands.
not even a joke, guys. If you go, you've got to watch this game. These throws are like way off. And even the defenders are like, what the Sam Hill?
It's like it was in his hands 1 second. Now some dude in the fourth row's playing with the ball. What was that? So I guess that is, but I honestly think
I'm playing the under. You've talked me into it. I am. You know what? I want that. There's nothing more Big Ten. I just feel like it's my civic duty.
Yeah.
Like I have to do this. I have to play an under 36. Yeah. Otherwise, I've just violated the dude code as a lifetime Big Tenner. It's the ultimate Big Ten play, under 36 in the year 2023. I have to do it.
I'm not doing that, and I'll explain why tomorrow on our confidence picks. I am very low on Iowa coming into this game. Last time they went up to Madison 2021, I was doing all sorts of trend lines like what's Wisconsin's record at home against Iowa, and were they overly favored between 3 and 5? No. Iowa just goes to die when they go to Madison, and I don't think this year is any different. I will say what might be different than this year than previous years. Iowa's blocking scheme in their run game has shown a little bit of diversity in terms of, and I don't pretend to know all the nuances about these styles of blocking, but they have been very heavy zone blocking, which is very hard to do at the college level. Mm-hmm. They've been doing a lot more gap blocking this year. Now, Caleb Johnson's big run, I believe that was a zone block scheme. But they have had some success in this different run blocking scheme, so maybe that'll give Wisconsin something different to think about. But man, I'm grasping at straws if I'm looking at zone blocking versus gap blocking schemes in one game in Madison. So I think this could have the potential to be a bloodbath up there this weekend.
Okay, let's get to the final topic, and if you don't mind, I think I'm going to call this a public service announcement. All right, because Tuck coming for his buyout, bro. All right. I don't talk about this a lot because it was not, well, at the time, it was the best time ever in my life. But the decisions I made during that time, while I thought they were brilliant and extremely leisurely at the moment, I have paid for them for the next 30 years. But there was a time, many, many a moon ago, that I was a student at Michigan State University because, and I don't mean to do this as a slam, but it's true, I couldn't get into Michigan, so I had to go to Michigan State. And while I was there, I rooted for Michigan the entire time and had too good of a time living in a co-ed dorm floor at Wonders Hall. Now, when you are a hormonally driven 19-year-old, living away from your parents on a co-ed floor seems like about the best idea you've ever heard. But when you turn 50, like I just did, you look back on those times and how little you have to show for it in a classroom because you were in every other room other than the classroom, and your student loan debt, and you realize that was not a good life choice, but I digress. But I only bring that up because maybe my past standing as a ne'er-do-well student at Michigan State University, they'll listen to me when I urge them. Paid that man his money, as they said in Rounders, okay? Because what Mel Tugger is pulling out now, I didn't mean to do that.
Oh, wow. It took me a little bit. If you hadn't
That was
listened,
not on purpose.
that would have gone over my homeschooling head.
That was not on purpose. Goodness gracious. I don't even know what to say now. Mel's got evidence, okay? All right. And stuff about his accuser, Brenda Tracy, having another affair with another married coach, and he's displaying text messages where she acknowledges that they've got to get some money out of this because the IRS is after. Dude, I don't know what's true. I don't. Here's what I do know, though. Tuck coming for his buyout. It's very clear, dude, he's lost his reputation. He's been embarrassed nationally. So he's got nothing to lose at this point, Aaron. Nothing. So might as well go scorched earth and pay me my damn money. And last week he sent notice he is going to do that. Good luck hiring another coach that you want of any standing with this mess still ongoing. We've had, I think, 4 new players enter the portal since he was fired. If I were in the administration at Michigan State,
Make it go away.
make this thing go away as absolutely fast as I possibly can, because I'm only about 7 weeks away from the season being over, and I got to get to hiring a coach.
Yeah, and I think, was it Clay Travis who was all over this from the
to his
get-go?
credit, yeah.
And I think we even brought it up, and maybe it deserved to be brought up a little bit more. When this first came out, we're like, how does one engage in non-consensual phone sex?
Right, can't you just hang up the phone?
Just like,
Right. I never understood that.
that was the very odd part. It's still a weird look to be having your name linked with somebody who's a sexual assault advocate.
Yes.
That's still a bad look.
You can be an incredibly debased, immoral figure, but not guilty of sexual harassment at the exact same time.
Yeah. So he's going to get paid. If he's lucky, he'll get the full amount. I don't think he will. But he's going to get a lot of money, more than just a few chiclets here and there.
I agree.
So what a odd story.
And going into we just talked about the schedule we're all going to be playing starting next year.
Yeah.
We've seen a trend line with coaches. That first recruiting class, because of the early signing period, you just get wiped out if there's a coaching change. You lose that class. You can't. If you're Michigan State, man, you have to nail this coaching hire, or you're down for 5 or 6 years in the forthcoming Big Ten, and you cannot have this cloud hanging around you. Other coaches are talking. Oh, okay. So if I have a failing in my marriage privately, I get fired. You don't want to do that, man.
Yeah.
Pay that man his money. That's what I would do as soon as possible and just try to walk away from this. All right, we're going to walk away from this segment. When we come back, time to play Would You Rather. All right, let's get it going, Aaron. Time to play Would You Rather. This one is for you. Would you rather bet UMass to cover against Penn State? I think that spread's like 42.
42.5, yeah.
Or Indiana on the money line against Michigan.
This is a really good one, but this one's Indiana is at Michigan. It's at the Big House, I believe.
Yep. Looking like 91% chance of rain.
Yeah.
Winds, early start.
You know what? I'm going to take UMass to cover against Penn State. I think James Franklin intentionally does not cover this time, just to dispel any of these rumors that he's paying attention to the spread. He's paying attention to the total.
There's a lot of curious decisions he makes at the end of games that just so happen to cover spreads, brother.
So I think maybe if that's getting back to him, I think they'll have enough points to make it look stylish, but I could see this like 42-0, something like that.
Yeah.
And
they have Penn State the next week too, or I'm sorry, Ohio State. So
and don't play
around.
Yeah, don't mess around. So I'm going to go UMass to cover against Penn State.
Okay.
For you, if you were Jim Harbaugh right now, would you rather accept a shiny new contract, which is being rumored, or test the waters once again in the NFL?
I think you're a 60-year-old coach. A bird in the hand is better than 2 in the bush. I take the contract right now. Who knows how prohibitive the buyout is that Michigan will put on there. And I don't know what would be a prohibitive buyout for an NFL team to not want him. Right now, it looks like there are 3 teams that will have coaching openings, potentially, that Jimmy has professional ties to. The Raiders, although that contract they gave Josh McDaniel, they may not be able to get out of that after just 2 years. The Bears, though, and the Chargers are looking more likely. And he's married to a gal who has made it, it's kind of an open secret. She wouldn't mind living on the West Coast again. But he's also 60, Aaron, and That's just not the trend line of who's getting hired in the National Football League right now. So I think if you're Jimmy and that deal is you're the best, highest paid coach in the Big Ten right now, and you might be looking at, by Michigan standards, a second straight subpar recruiting class, which means top 15 instead of top 10. And a lot of that is because of rumors you're going to bounce for the NFL. I think you take that contract right now. That's insurance. And then you wait and see. Maybe the Chargers are like, you know what? We've got a ready-made playoff roster. We're willing to put up with your antics for a couple of years to see if you can put us over the top. And if they do, you walk away. But that's a gamble. You tried it 2 years in a row with the NFL and it didn't pay off. You take the deal when it's on your table right now, because the bird in the hand is better than two in the bush. For you, would you rather be Brett Bielema or Mario Cristobal right now? Bielema said this last loss to Nebraska at home, the most frustrating in his career as a head coach, calling out his offensive scheme, changes need to be made. Mario Cristobal, however, I don't know what he was doing, didn't take a knee. They end up fumbling. I watched that live, by the way.
Did you?
Watched it live.
See,
and it blew my mind watching it.
I saw it was on YouTube TV. I saw it was, like a half an hour before. I saw it was going on, and then it was like 45 minutes later. I'm like, why is this game not over?
Well, here's
yet?
why I tuned it in live. I was down to 2 games on my money line parlay I do every week with heavy favorites.
Oh no!
And I was down to 2 games, USC and Miami, and so I tuned it over to Miami because they had just come back against Georgia Tech, and I thought, okay, I'm going to pull this one out, and so I watched that happen in real time. I mean, is it Tim Hasselback is the one that does the media for the games, not Matt? I think it's Tim.
Yeah.
He could not believe it, dude, and neither could I watching it. Why would you not just take a knee? It just didn't make any sense. It's one of the worst choke jobs in the history of intercollegiate football. So which of those 2 coaches would you try to be right now getting your team back up off the mat?
See, unbeknownst to you and I kind of were on the same track. I was going to ask you, kind of abandon the Big Ten theme for a little bit. Would you rather lose a game by failing to take a knee when the other team had no timeouts and no ability to stop the clock? Or would you rather lose the game by allowing a last second, I should say, Hail Mary, which is basically what that was.
I've lived through that.
Because Mario Cristobal did both.
He did both. Because I've lived through the latter. Colorado, Michigan, Rocket 66. I've lived through that.
This is not the first time Mario Cristobal has done this either.
Stanford, Oregon.
In it wasn't the exact same situation, but it was pretty dang similar, where it's like you just take a knee and you make them drive the length of the field via punts if they even stop you. So I would rather be Brett Bielema.
I agree.
This pissed off so many people, so I don't think there's anything that I could add. But good grief. You just can't make those mistakes at this level. I find it offensive, actually. I'm not a person that gets easily offended, even though I'm a millennial snowflake. It's offensive to my intelligence. My probably subpar to medium to 3/4 wit intelligence. It's offensive to me. So I would rather be Brett Bielema. Finally, would you rather bet Iowa, Wisconsin over 36 or Rutgers, Michigan State over 39.5?
That one's tough, man. I mean, that one is tough. You know what? I don't want any part of the over. Michigan State might be going to its backup quarterback.
Really? I did not see that.
I mentioned they had another player enter the transfer portal, one of their running backs. You know, Greg Schiano is cut from the same cloth of Kirk Ferentz. He's happy winning homecoming 2-0. You know that.
Yep.
So I don't want any part of the over there at all. I guess I'll go over the 36, if only because I do think I could see Deacon Hill being good for a turnover, a pick six, given the defense he's going to face in his second start is going to give him a lot of looks that he's not used to seeing. But man, I don't like the over in either game. But I guess I'd rather go over 36 than 39.5, all things being even.
Well said.
That's a tough question, Money. I mean, you almost blew my mind with that question.
You're welcome.
That was hard. You Kobayashi Maru'd me right there. We'll come back, close things out here in a moment. This week's Twitter results from our Twitter poll, I should say, halfway through the season, who's the best football team in the Big Ten? 73% said Michigan. 20% said Penn State. Only 7% said Ohio State. Something just seems wrong about that to me. That it's only 7%? Only 7%? And I you know me,
Stronger
man.
resume, Ohio State or Penn State?
Ohio State's got the better resume, winning on the road at Notre Dame, for example, beating Maryland. I think Maryland and West Virginia are at least equal, probably. And then Penn State doesn't have any win close. Nobody in the Big Ten has a win close to going on the road and winning at Notre Dame in prime time when the Irish were not yet the beat-up team we've seen the last couple of weeks, but we're all in on that game. That's the best win in the Big Ten, I think.
Yeah, so that's a little odd to me. I still think Michigan as being the best team in the Big Ten. You got to.
But by that margin?
By that margin, I'm not sure about.
Yeah, I don't think it's by that margin.
Yeah, I think it's undisputed that they probably are the best team. But you can squabble if you want to weight your results more on what the resume is, as we just did. You have a case for putting Ohio State over Penn State, but when it comes to the eye test, that's when these results kind of make a little bit more sense. Yeah. Although I think I would put Penn State more 25-30 and Michigan at 65-70. When you go strictly on the eye test, these results make more sense. But yeah, when you're talking about resume, there's a conversation for Ohio State being number 2.
All right. This week's feedback of the week, Marcus Gilkison. I tweeted out after Iowa beat Purdue, another big win for Phil Parker, your defensive coordinator. And Marcus responded, Phil should get the $7 million a year and Kirk the 1.8, meaning they should swap out contracts. Is that true or false on that, Aaron?
I think if Kirk Ferentz resigns after this season, so I would. True, probably.
I mean, Phil's about 60 now too, isn't he?
Yeah, I think if Ferentz resigns after this season, if they bring in a new head coach, if they don't hire from within, I think Phil's gone too. I think if they promoted LeVar Woods, the special teams coordinator, which would be the most Iowa thing ever, we're promoting him to our head coach now. I know that would be hilarious. I think that would actually be a really good move. He's a good recruiter. He's a really good leader on that team. I think Parker would consider, not a lock, I think he would consider staying around as defensive coordinator for a few more years. But in terms of where the real value on this team is, it's a 3-phase game, and there's 2 phases that are vastly outperforming one of those phases, and I'll let you guess what those phases are by virtue of the fact that Torrey Taylor, the punter, gets a standing ovation almost every time he comes out onto the field, and the defense, which is still, even though it's taken a step back, is still one of the best probably in the country, top 15, top 20 at least. You can see where the value is on this team.
I would think Phil would be, even though he's 60, but Dick LeBeau was pretty old and lasted for a long time. I think he'd be an excellent NFL defensive coordinator. Not necessarily a huge rah-rah guy. He plays a very technically sound assignment style of defense that translates to the NFL. Like, it's not gimmicky. We're blitzing everybody all the time because we got better players. But you can't do that in the NFL because everybody's got great players. I mean, under your scenario, I could see NFL teams calling him for sure.
Yeah.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for this week. Don't forget to like, rate, subscribe, share, follow, 5-star review, whether you're watching here on YouTube or listening on iTunes or elsewhere. Please let them know that you guys love our show. Help us to find more Big Ten fans just like you as well. Don't forget to follow us in between episodes at Bigger10 on Twitter, at Bigger10 on Twitter. We'll be back tomorrow with this week's confidence picks. Until next week, for Aaron McIntyre, I'm Steve Deace. We'll see you then right here on Bigger 10.